Welcome to the Zen Podcast. Today we've got a really interesting guest, and he has a podcast that is all about helping men access their intuition. And I am just delighted to have this conversation today with Doug Beitz. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shannon. Glad to be here.
So, Doug, I was listening to some of your stuff, and I must admit I did a bit of a survey asking the guys in my life what they would ask an intuitive coach for men, or what would they like to know about intuition. And one was, well, I hadn't really thought about it. Maybe I should. And how would you do that in the first place? And then another one was, how do you even start? And so maybe, Doug, you could start with how did you start? How did you end up having a successful podcast on men and intuition? And what started you on this super interesting path?
On the journey, yeah. Look, I'm now 61. When I was 47, I had an epiphany. And when my brother was 47, he and his best mate went interstate traveling. They went away to the snow. So we minded my brother's two sons for the 2 weeks while he was vacationing. Halfway through that vacation, I got a phone call you don't want to get. And he said, my best mate has had a brain aneurysm. They were both 47. We've got him to the hospital. It took us 6 hours to get him there because they had to bring a snow plow in the middle of the night to dig a path out to get him out. 6 days later, they turned the machines off, and his best buddy since they were 8 passed away from this brain aneurysm. Now, I was 12 years younger at that time, and 47 seemed a lifetime away. Now, all of a sudden, I'm 47, and I start to think, oh, my brother's best mate was, and the three of us were all professional firefighters at the time, was super duper, like he was super fit. He was like the guy. And I had a pretty average sort of body. I'd never taken my body serious. So suddenly I was his age, and I thought, oh, this is, it started to set in. And I then just went on a journey to improve my health. Happened to read a book that changed what I ate radically. It didn't put me on a diet, because people go on diets for 2 weeks and then I changed and I still, all these years later, 14 years later, changed. But what happened over the next few months, Shannon, was I basically dropped all processed food out of my diet. And I used to be a chocoholic. I tell people at 47, I'd eaten 5 lifetimes worth of sugar. Like, I was into it. And over the next few months, as my body changed, I dropped 25 pounds in 2.5 months without trying to lose weight. I had no idea that I was even overweight at all. It just dropped off without trying. And
Wow,
my thoughts started to clear. Sorry.
Oh, I'm just like, chocolate. I'm like, are you sure chocolate's a processed food? Can't we keep that out of the processed? What's categorized as a processed food? What if you melt the chocolate chips yourself? Are they still considered a processed food?
Well, I now do. I've actually, in the last 6 to 12 months, I've dropped coffee mostly out of my consumption, and I've replaced it with cacao. But like, I was a once a day coffee drinker anyway.
Yeah.
About 10 in the morning, I'd have my coffee, and so I've replaced that with cacao. And my son and daughter-in-law, they buy these huge, big, 10, 15 pound blocks of cacao, like the real stuff. And we get a real sharp knife and sort of pare it off, slice it off, and melt it down. So I am having that. And I love sweet things. I'm still addicted to sweet things, but I've changed what they are. But basically, that dietary change opened my eyes, and I started to see the world as the months progressed very differently. And
Wow, so things just got clearer.
Yes, clarity of thought started to drop in. And I started to be interested in a lot of different things that I wasn't before because a lot of different things started to make sense to me. I one day, don't ask me, look, I was brought up in the church. I was, my whole life, if you were into some Eastern religion, tarot cards, or something like that, like you were possessed by the devil in my mind. I was like, boom, that's how I thought. Now my thoughts are changing and I'm having different thoughts on that. Next thing I find myself researching online to try and find a book on palm reading. I'm not even sure why. And I'm researching on Amazon and I'm sort of glancing through a few, reading a little bit about them. Nothing struck me. All of a sudden, I see a book advertised on Chinese face reading. So I forget all about palm reading and I'm starting, and this book looks, I instantly download it on to my Kindle, start reading it. I'm fascinated in it. So I go on to the lady's website. She's in California and she was an American, but she was married to a Chinese man previously, and her Chinese mother-in-law had educated her in depth in Chinese medicine, etc., etc. And so I became fascinated with that. I got on her mailing list, and a year or so later, she put out a new book about energy clearing. And I was on vacation in Phuket in Thailand at the time, sitting by the pool, and I downloaded this thing onto my Kindle and I started reading it. Fascinated, and said to my wife, in 2 months' time, there's a seminar on in California. And, like we live in Australia and we're on holidays in Thailand, and it goes for 5 days, and it's probably going to be a room full of women. Like, I'd really like to go. I want to go and learn how to clear energy. So she's looking at me weird, like, you know,
You've lost the plot. What were you
yeah,
drinking at the
big
pool
time,
in
big time.
Thailand?
Yeah, yeah, nah, yeah. And she just thought, yeah. Anyway, she goes, off you go. Like, you're a nut. And off I go. And this lady sort of gives us a bit of an intro. She says, your lives are about to change. This is going to happen. That'll happen, like da da da. And I'm thinking, she goes, you probably have weird dreams. And I'm someone who never, ever remembers their dreams. That night, I can still remember the dream, the craziest, weirdest dream that wasn't good, wasn't bad. It was just weird, different. It was like, what is going on here? I'm thinking, God, this lady's like in my head. Anyway, we learned to clear energy for the 5 days. It was absolutely life-changing for me. We're at this beautiful place in this redwood forest, and it had these massive, big, thick tables that you could sit 20 people at with, 3-inch thick timber tops that had been cut out of the trees. And it was just big fire burning. It was just this magnificent place. And it just was transforming. So I came home from that. Then there was she had another class on 6 months later, 5 days again. The higher level, I went and did that. And at that one, she said, I've got another one on. So then, like months later, I was back in there. And that one that
Wow,
we
that's
did
a
out on a,
commitment. You
yeah,
knew.
that one, yeah, was on a real remote place, 3 hours east of Seattle. We went out to this tiny little town on I think it was the Colorado River. She rented two B&B homes, really big homes side by side on this river.
Columbia
And
River, maybe.
sorry, Columbia, that's it. Yeah,
Columbia.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, it was just like in nature, and they're sort of warning me, like, you've got to shut the door because bears could come in. And I was like, oh wow, that'd be really we never saw a bear. But anyway, so yeah, so did all that. And what happened there, she warned us, your intuition will come online, and it all did start to. But it was frustrating because intuitive messages were coming through to me and I couldn't interpret them. It was like this is Chinese going on and I don't speak Chinese and I don't know I couldn't interpret it. And
How did you know they were coming to you?
well, I was feeling sensations in my body. Things were
Okay.
changing. Like it was like, and it's like, oh, what's going on? I'm sensing things. And when we were clearing energy, like she said, you'll get intuitive impressions. Well, when I arrived for the first one, there was 50 of us there. 5 of us were men. Now, one of them was there with his wife, and he was happy to be there. Two of them had booked to go to different seminars at this convention center, and those conventions got cancelled last minute. So the people said, "Why don't you join this one?" So these two men are in there. One of them had come in from London, and they're like, "What are we in?" And then there was another young guy in his early 20s, and his grandma bought him a ticket, and she'd been before to classes and said, "You're going." So look, I'm the only actual guy who's there who chose to go there, in this room
Right.
full of women.
Right.
And like women are just naturally intuitive, I found. And I wasn't getting it how they were getting it. We're pairing off, clearing each other's energy. And most of them, not all of the women, but at least half of them, they're picking up all sorts of intuitive things about me and my life. And they were accurate. And I'm like, I can't, it just wasn't working for me. I'm like, and I said to the lady Jean, I said, "This is just, what this is not what men do. I want to do it, but it just is not coming through." And because I've always been what I thought a steak on the plate kind of guy, not a pie in the sky. And now
An
I was sort
Australian
of,
firefighter. It doesn't really
yeah.
get more manly than that. I'm afraid to say it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was, and at this point, I had left the fire service. We were now living on a little Pacific island north of the equator with our own scuba dive resort,
Oh my
and
goodness. Living
yeah,
the
so
dream.
yeah, and that's where I was. So I was sort of traveling in and out of there, and um, yeah, life was changing and everyone thought I was nutty. And so one day, probably back in 2021, something like that, I was driving in the car and I was just so frustrated. And I wasn't angry, I was just frustrated. And on my own, I just cried out very loud to the universe, "Send me someone to help me interpret the language of my intuition, because I just don't get it. I can sense all these messages coming through, but there's this thick veil there and they can't penetrate. And when they do, most of them they're not in a foreign language, but it's like that. I just don't get it." And I've been around now for years on Zoom and face to face with a lot of people, and they're all female, who really are very intuitive. At the third class I went to over when we were in Seattle, there was one man there who was there very voluntarily. And I don't mean to be discriminatory here at all. He was a super nice guy, but he was extremely outwardly gay. And he had a full-time business clearing people's energy. And
Okay.
we were pairing up, and then one time she put us into groups of three, and I was in the group with him. And he's just bringing through, like, he's just this information, and I'm just like, I'm pissed because I'm thinking, "Oh, you're a guy and you're doing exactly what I want to do." And I just don't get it. He had it. So I was like, all right, he was so intuitive and he'd been doing it for years. So the messages are coming through, but So then once I cried out within a day or two, bang, the universe put someone across my path and things went from there. And I joined the Intuitive Life Coaching Academy for a year. And it was all on Zoom, but live. And it was in America, so I was getting up at 4 in the morning, hooking into you could do the calls recorded, but I wanted to
Yeah.
be part of it and immerse in it. So yeah, so twice a week I'd be up at 4 a.m. and jump on these calls, and 20, 30 women in the Zoom room, and then since I've left, a couple of other guys have gone to the academy, but they all came in after, and I've hooked up with them. I've interviewed them, had them on my podcast. They're super duper good guys. So that's sort of how I've got on the journey. And then the reason for the podcast is different again, and I'll go into that if you'd like as well. Or
Yeah. Well, I would love to know. I love that story. I was totally just, I just couldn't wait to hear what was happening next. Why don't we take it to basics? What does intuition mean to you? And what were you trying so hard to access? Was it like what you should do next, how you could help somebody? Why did you, I guess you were curious originally,
yeah,
all
yeah.
that
So like
stuff.
Yeah. So let's say 35 years ago, I heard the term, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And
Mm,
that just smacked me in the face when I heard that. And I instantly thought of my father. And I thought, oh God, that just explains my dad's life, why he is living a life of quiet desperation. And he was. And I always looked at dad like as the example of the life I didn't want to lead. And not to criticize him. And since he passed 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago at 92, I've had very deep meditative situations where it's come through to me like this whole realm of information on why my dad lived that life and
right,
how it benefited me. Because when he
right.
was alive, I didn't see the benefits in this
Yeah.
example, whereas now it has a whole different meaning. But I've not, I just have this compassion for men that I don't want them to live a life of quiet desperation because I do
Right.
understand. I've had times where I've felt quietly desperate. And I, if there's ladies listening, they'll think, oh, that applies to us too, and yeah, it does. But when I heard it 35 years ago, my very sexist mind took it just for men, and the person that wrote that 150 years ago was probably referring to everybody, but I just took it for men.
The reason why I'm excited to have you on the podcast and have this discussion with you is because I've spent most of my career in very male industries. And I've worked most of my career with engineers and and you see a difference, right? I even see the difference with my son and my husband and they certainly don't talk as much as I do. But you have to pull things out of them. They're not naturally going to share about things. And that was, almost every man that I worked with. So I feel that there is a difference there. And there's been, hundreds of years of societal expectations and societal norms placed on so many cultures and so many men that I think it's pretty fair to say that there is a difference there in terms of what's been deemed as acceptable and not. And I feel that that's changing. And if I can help in any way that move along or help someone have an epiphany to make their lives easier or that, then I'm like, this is great. And especially, I've had a few guys reaching out that have listened to various episodes that I've had, and some are just applying to my experience and work, and others are a little bit more stretching the envelope of possibility. And I think it's just so cool that potentially these guys that I've worked with can listen to this conversation and have something that can help them in any way.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, leading lives of quiet desperation and not wanting it, what I've found is intuition for me is there's a benevolent force that I can't see. And when I started to go down this road, when my thoughts started, my mind started to clarify things, I started to become fascinated with everything unseen. I just started to sense there was a realm out there. And what I've learned through the years, this is my interpretation of it, it's an unseen realm where whatever you want to call that force there, God, the universe, the creator, chi, prana, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. It loves us and it wants to help us, but we have to let it. So it's constantly trying to send messages to us, synchronicities or whatever. And if someone goes, what's a synchronicity? This is what it is for me. 30 plus years ago, it happens very different now, but back then, this is when I start to first remember it. Something would happen that was unusual that got my attention. But the first time it happened, I went, oh, wow, that's unusual. Big deal. Go on with life. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, a similar thing would happen. I go, oh, that was like that thing that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. Oh, wow. Go on with my life. And then another week or two or three later, another thing would happen. And it was a similar, and it all tied in. And I'm like, oh, wow, this must be a message from somewhere, like getting my attention. Then, 10 years ago, I would have something happen. And then a day later, the same thing would happen. And I'd go, oh, I'm taking notice and I'm actually going to do something. And I recognize that this is a sign. Now I've sort of got it down to it happens once and I'm like, oh, okay, yes, that's unusual. Boom. And I act on it. So I've shortened the length of time to where I start to recognize that something's going on. And so I'm realizing that because and sometimes some of these messages that come through, synchronicities or impressions, or sometimes I just, because I've got 4 adult sons and they'll say to me, Dad, how do you know that? Like what I've just said or what I've done. And I go, I don't know, mate, I just know. And they go, yeah, but where did you learn that? Who told you that? What podcast did you get that off? Did you get that off
Yeah.
Joe Rogan? No, though. I just know it. And like, yeah, but it mightn't be right if you didn't learn it somewhere. And I'll go, well, I don't need to learn it. I just, because it works. And they're like, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I know it. It's an inner knowing. It's like, well, I guess you could say, how do you know how to breathe? I don't know. I just do it. And other things come to you like that. And I just follow it and it works. And when I follow it, it always helps and it always benefits me. So my thing is what I want men to do, if they could follow these gut feelings, these hunches, and it comes different for everybody. There's no set way. We're all different. When they come, if we can follow one of those a day and get the benefit from it, could imagine in 3 months if every man on the planet every day followed their intuitive hit, however it came, and they acted on it, and it just made their life that little bit better. Every day, they would then, after a week or two, they would be feeling better about themselves, their self confidence. They would be leading less of a life of quiet desperation. They wouldn't kick the cat as often as when they got home. Because when I was a little boy, Shannon, my dad drank a real lot. Every Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. When he
Mm.
drove in the driveway, we basically held our breath. When I was real little, I was excited Dad was home. But as the years went on, he would never be physical when he came in the door, but it would be verbal and emotional. And well, by the time I was 10, 11, 12, 14, we would basically hold our breath when he would walk in the door. And the best we could hope for is he went straight to the bedroom and collapsed on the bed
Mm.
and went to sleep. And when we would just breathe a sigh of relief. And I don't want young children feeling bad or scared or anxious when they hear their dad drive in the driveway like I used to.
Mhm.
Because he was leading a life of quiet desperation. So he would go to the local bar and drink and drink and drink. And dad was tall. He was 6 foot tall. And my mum, she was Italian, well, heritage, and she was 4'10", but she didn't
Wow.
let her size, she didn't let that bother her at all. So he'd come in the door and I'd be just thinking, praying like, Mum, don't say anything. Because, she would challenge him and stand up to him, like, where have you been spending all our money on, booze and like, rah, rah, rah. And she always went to church and she was, basically, you're a sinner, you're going to hell sort of thing,
Oh,
and that would, antagonize the whole thing. And
yeah.
he would just,
And make him feel deep shame why he was probably drinking in the first place.
exactly, yeah. And he smoked too, so he was going to hell for that as well, yeah, so it wasn't fun. And I just realized once I started to get this intuitive information, follow synchronicities and stuff like that, my life changed for the better in incredible ways. But when these synchronicities come through or this intuitive information, in the beginning, it's just like, do this, follow this, and it's getting you to do things a little different to normal. And it's nothing that unusual. But as time goes on, sometimes the information's a bit extreme, and it can be like hinting very strongly that you take this other path over this way, and you're like, dude, if I take that path over that way and that doesn't work, I am going to look like an absolute fool. People will just laugh at me forever. They already think I'm a nutter. But what I was finding is on those occasions when I would dare to take that path, the reward for doing that was phenomenal. And so here's this, I started to realize I've got this benevolent force who loves me and is trying to help me. And on the odd occasion when I actually take their advice, just like wonderful, amazing things going. And I'm just, oh, I could see them there in the background, like three or four of them giving each other a high five and going, he finally effing listened to what we were trying to get through to him for the last 6 years. God, he's there elated, thinks he's really clever. That could have happened years ago. Like, boom. Like, and then the next day they try and help me with something. I'm like, oh, too scared to follow that. But, as weeks go on and
So how would that come in? Like, how would you, do you have an example of following one, like being faced with a decision kind of, or knowing to go down one path and it really
yep,
worked out? Like, did you
sure.
have a voice inside your head? How did that show up?
Do you want a biggie or a littlie?
Oh, well, we've got some time. Whichever one is the most whichever one your intuition wants to share with us.
Okay, I'll start with the little one because this is a real basic one, like the super basic. A couple of years ago, probably 2, 3 years ago, it was our wedding anniversary, and I work a couple of days a week, and it was a day where I had to work. It was a Thursday. As I'm saying goodbye to my wife in the morning, I said, "Look, I'm sorry, I've got to work late tonight. Just the way the roster went, I won't be home till 7:30. We won't be able to go out to dinner for our anniversary, but maybe we'll go out tomorrow night or something." So about 4 o'clock, all of a sudden, I look at my roster on my phone. My last job's been cancelled. I'm like, "Oh, awesome! I'm going to get home at 5." So I ring my wife. I say, "Boom, things have changed. I'm going to be home at 5. We'll go out for dinner." She's like, "Oh, great." I said, "Look, I'm running like tight. I've got a lot of traffic to get home. You organize the restaurant, like ring up, book somewhere, bang, I'll whip in, shower, change, off we'll go." So I get home at 5, walk in the door, and I'm going, okay, like walk into to the bathroom, like, "Where are we going?" And she goes, "Well, we can go to this place that we've been before, pizza and pasta, and we've been there 3 times before, and it's okay, it's nice." She goes, "Oh, there's this other Thai restaurant that we haven't been to that's got a good name, and I'd heard of it." And she goes, like, "Which one do you want to go to?" And I'm like, I was not ready for that question. I was a little bit because I thought I'd prearranged that
Yeah,
she
yeah,
was going to have
yeah,
this decision
yeah.
made. Now, the words that wanted to come out of my mouth were, "I don't know." But before those words came out, a little voice popped in and said, "Don't say that, you do know."
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, okay. Like now, I don't usually get voices in my head very often, but
Okay.
at that point, now it wasn't like audible, but it was in my head and it just said, "Don't say that," because it knew I was going to verbalize, "I do not know."
Right.
And my wife does know that I'm sometimes a little slow to answer, though I'll contemplate before I'll verbalize. And the only thing I was going to quickly verbalize was, "I don't know." So now all of a sudden, inside, and I know it's my intuition speaking to me, and it says, "You do know." So I'm like, okay, how do I work? How am I going to work out between these two restaurants? So I go, all right, how will I feel if we go to the pizza and pasta restaurant we've been to before? How will I feel when we've finished there, like after that event? And I just had this inner feeling that was nothing particular. I can tell you, it was just like, it was sort of almost like a nothing feeling. And I thought, okay. And then I thought, how will I feel if we go to this new Thai restaurant that we haven't been to before? So it's untested. Other people say it's good. And all of a sudden I felt just a little bit better inside. Nothing substantial, no,
Yeah.
no rainbows, no unicorns, there was no, oh, beautiful feeling.
No
I just felt,
trumpets.
no, no, nothing. No, it wasn't the angels in heaven trumpeting away like, "Duh-duh, this is the place to go." I just felt slightly better than I did 5 seconds ago. And I said, okay, let's go to Thai. I'll go and have a shower. Off we go. Boom. We get to the Thai restaurant. We walk in the door. We get there at 5:30 on a Thursday, thinking like, easy, we'll get a table. And we said to the lady, "Have you got a table for two?" She goes, "Oh, have you got a reservation?" Oh, no. Oh, okay. Let me check here. And she's going through. She goes, "Oh, okay. We've just got this window table. So it's like a high table sort of thing with like a high stool. We've
Yeah.
got those sort of looking out the window over here, and that's the only one we've got left. I'm really sorry. And unfortunately, you'll have to be gone by 7, like, which is 90 minutes." I'm going, "No problem." Because we're not lingerers in a restaurant. Like, we'll be out of here in an hour and a half. No worries. So off we go. We sit there. And then all of a sudden, one of our sons who's been raving to us about this restaurant sort of toddles in through the door, and because he's ordered takeout. Well, so we have a nice little chat with him for 5 minutes. And we've been to Thailand 5 or 6 times, and we're not big drinkers, but they have a particular type of beer that's there, and it's $1 a bottle, and it's real, it's not, we enjoy drinking it. And so, even in Thailand, we'd only have one. And so they have that brand of beer. So yeah, let's have a singer. So we get one of them each, and the sun was setting, shining in, and we had a beautiful evening. It was really nice. A bit before 7, off we go, and we go home. Now, had we gone to the pizza or pasta restaurant, we probably wouldn't have got food poisoning. We probably would have been okay. But we had a really good night, and it was I believe it was a better experience than what we'd have had at the other place. And that was a real good lesson for me because, like when you get hit with a question and you're like, oh, you just want to go, oh, I don't know. But
Well, that's amazing. Just tap into how do you feel when you go through both scenarios. That sounds
mm,
simple enough.
yeah. And then I said to my wife the next day, I told her, I said to her, when I came home and, like da da da, I said, and I just explained that to her. And she goes, "Well, I wanted to go to Thai." She goes, "But because it was our wedding anniversary, not mine, ours, I didn't want to make the sole decision. So I wanted, but it's where she wanted to go."
Yeah.
And so that's a simple one. Yeah, real simple. And then I can go the other end of the spectrum quite easily too, where extreme
Well, I
ones.
I think these examples really help because they make it real. And maybe in a second, I find that I've heard more and more people say, oh, that was a gut decision or that felt right. And I've been a big believer in intuition for a long time, partly because it showed up on the Myers-Briggs test, which is your classic academic test. And it always had me on the far side of the intuition continuum, and then pretty set on the other ones as well. But as I got older, I moved towards the middle on all the things except for the intuition one. That one stayed on the far side. But I think that's often as close as people will get to quantifying really or qualifying intuition. But it's been okay to talk about, oh, I had a gut feeling about that. And now that there's information coming out about the sensors in our gut, or like neurosensors being in our gut, that conversation is evolving quite a bit. And so I think all those examples help so much for people to realize when they're happening. So I guess long story short, we can move into that stuff, but I would love to hear your longer story.
Sure. So I'm 61. Let's go back late 20s. I'm probably 28. And my wife's pregnant with our third son. Got about a month or two before he's born. We're at the monthly checkup in the doctor surgery. And like in the prior few years, I've come up with lots, dozens and dozens of different weird and wonderful business ideas that I'd love to start. Run them past my wife. She just looks at me like, "You're an idiot. Like, you're dreaming. That's just stupid. Don't do that." So I've got a very hormonal now, like, 7 months pregnant. We're at the doctor surgery. I pick up this magazine off the coffee table and I start reading it. And it's a business magazine. And there's a 3-page article in there on the business opportunities in Micronesia, which is a little group of islands north of the equator between Guam and Hawaii. And the bank over there, the development bank, are giving out these real cheap, low interest loans to attract foreigners in to build infrastructure to help the country, develop. And so I turned to her and I tell her about what I've just read. And I said, wow, like, what do you think about moving to Micronesia and doing something over there? Like, there's all these cheap loans and everything. And she sort of looks at me. Now, she'd never lived more than a 10-minute drive from her parents. And she saw her mother nearly every day. But she'd had a fight with her mum, I think, on the phone that morning. And she's like, yep, let's go. And I'm like, really? You want to
Whoa.
move overseas to a foreign country? Like, yep, let's get out of here. And I said, well, what would we do over there? And she goes, well, maybe we could build a hotel or something. I don't know. So she sees the doctor, we go home, we
She
talk
sounds
about it.
amazing.
We talk about it for the rest of the day. The only night of my life I've never been able to sleep was that night. This thing started burning in my gut. Like I just laid there awake all night. And I go to sleep real easy. Like you ask my wife, I just lay down, go to sleep. I laid there all night thinking about this thing. I get up the next day exhausted and I said, oh, and so I get in the car because this is, like a long pre-internet or everything. I get back in the car, I go back to the doctor's surgery. I walk in and I pick up the business magazine off the table and I say to the ladies at the counter, look, there's an article in here I have to have. I have to take the magazine, or do you have a photocopy? No, we got a photocopy. So they copied the 3 pages and I took it. And then I jumped on the phone when I got home to the magazine, like to find out the contact details for the author of the thing. He lived like a couple of hour drive away. I rang him. 3 days later, we're at his house for half a day, and I'm just pumping him like for information. And sorry, a month before this, go back a month. We're sitting watching TV one Saturday night, like having dinner, 6:30 at night. And in Australia, we had this show back then called The World Around Us. And one of the news reporters, they'd travel somewhere and they would do this big 1 hour thing on these locations. Well, a month before, it was on these islands in the middle of Micronesia. And they went, they
Interesting.
traveled to 4 different islands. And my wife and I sat there absolutely gobsmacked, like watching this. And it's not that far from Australia, but we'd never heard of it. It used to be called the Caroline Islands and this sort of thing. And anyway, we were fascinated. Now, all of a sudden, here's this business article. Turns out the guy that wrote the article, he was part of the film crew that went up there and filmed this other thing.
No
So
way.
he'd spent a week or two up there. So I pumped him for half a day. Like he was so generous with his time, and I'm asking ridiculous amounts of questions. And then it just blew from there. And then, and actually before all that, I've jumped ahead. Even before we saw the doco, I bumped into a guy in the line in the bank. Remember in the old days, we would line up in the bank for
Yeah.
hours waiting, before ATMs and all that sort of stuff. And next thing, there's a guy in front of me in the line from school who I hadn't seen in like well over 10 years. And I got talking to him and I said, what have you been up to, Chris? Oh, my brother and I just got back from Guam scuba diving. And I'm like, oh, where's Guam? And, like da 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 da. And it was sort of like, so over a period of like more than a month, these 3 things all came together. And it was like, wow, like all this about this part of the world we never heard of. Anyway, long story short, 2 months later, like, and remember, no internet. So I'm doing all this research. I'm going to the library, ordering books on Micronesia, and there aren't many, I can tell you. There weren't back then, and trying to find out. I'm ringing the Australian embassy over there, asking them questions. And then, soon as our 3rd son was born, a couple of weeks later, I jumped on a plane for a month. I went over there, came back, sold the house, and put all the money. Like
Wow.
we applied for the loan, got the loan, organised a contractor from Australia, and away we went. Built the place, and it happened.
You built
Yeah,
what place? What did you do?
we built a 18-room hotel, restaurant, and scuba dive business. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
amazing. And then
that
we
is
got
amazing.
and then I've got just as big of a synchronicity story for when we sold it and left. Like,
Wow.
that's another whole big one as well. So that's two ends of the spectrum. Like, just what am I going to feel like if I go to this restaurant for dinner,
Yeah.
um, or absolute life changing. Now, I was talking
That
with
doesn't
them.
sound like quiet desperation to me.
No, well, yeah. And so now I've had those experience. Maybe my sons have said to me, like, Dad, the fact that you've done that, like, you can't look on anything as too hard. Like you just go and do it. And it makes me feel good because I've set a very good example for my sons. I've got four sons, and so I don't feel quietly desperate about that. And I was listening to a podcast the other day of an Austrian philosopher and an Irish guy who's studying neuroscience. And the Irish guy it was his podcast. And it was getting to these really different things that I normally listen to. But it was the Austrian philosopher, he'd studied huge amounts of stuff since he was a teenager and philosophy and everything. And he brought out a whole new concept to me last week that I hadn't thought of that fits, for me, it fits real well. And for people who are striving to improve their lives, etc., they're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. But he talked about this ridiculous pursuit of happiness. And everyone wants to be happy all the time. And he said, my studies have shown, and he was going through a lot of stuff with philosophers. He even went to the book of Job. I don't know how familiar you are with that book of Job in the Bible. In my going to church years, in my early 20s, I've read the Bible a couple of times from cover to cover. And if anyone's familiar with the book of Job, he went through absolute hell. Even tried to take his life and couldn't do it. It
Wow.
couldn't, it was over. But at the very end of it, Job came very content with his life. And that's what this philosopher was talking about, being content. And
Mm,
my intuition, like studies and how it's helping my life, I started to realize listening to this guy the other day how content it makes me with my life. And for people who are striving for, I've got to get a 7 or 8 figure income, I've got to do this, I've got to have 78 written goals in front of me at all times, and I've got to achieve them, and I've got to, the whole thing. And I've tried all that stuff. Like, so I'm not saying it's wrong, but I've been there, done that. But listening to this guy the other day talking about being quietly content with where you are, because he said, I'm telling you, like he was in his 70s and he said, life's not easy. Life's effing hard. Like and most people would agree. Most of the time, our life's challenging and it needs to be that way to keep us moving forward and to experience. We go through a lot of experiences, but I'm finding being able to make better decisions, I'm more content with myself. Yes, it makes
mm.
me happier, um, and it makes me happy when I see other people learn to do that as well. And yeah, yeah.
You do some coaching on the side,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so,
Yep.
of the men that you've coached, are there any stories in there that really stood out or that stand out to you of somebody just being able to make a change in their life or having one trajectory and then looking
Yeah,
like their trajectory changed?
yeah. I'm just thinking of one particular. It mightn't fit that bill exactly, but it's come to me straight up. So I remember one gentleman having all sorts of challenges in life in general. And I was able to meet with him in person. He didn't live that far away. And so that was, Zoom's great. I love it. Like it's changed the world. But there's just something about being face to face I just find at
Mhm.
a different level and it's preferable for me. And we're, over the weeks, chatting away, talking over different things, just the stuff that's coming out. And he said to me once, he goes, when I go home, my wife's saying, what did Doug say? What did Doug suggest? And he goes, Doug actually doesn't say a lot. And that's how coaching works. I mean, because I don't know his answers. He does. All his
Yeah,
answers are
yeah.
within him. And I'm just asking thought-provoking questions constantly to bring it out of him. And I know I can remember, and he's not a wealthy person, but not certainly not scraping by at all either, doing pretty well compared to most people financially. But we'd agreed on a fee for the 6 weeks of coaching, and it was very funny that I found it funny, and I did point it out to him in the end. We started talking about money, and I said to him, I made a comment to him. I said, money flows where it's liked or enjoyed, or and he's like, oh, because, and then we came out with the conversation that he did not have a good relationship with money. He was not short of money, but he didn't actually like money. And he had a large sum of money just sitting in the bank getting like 1% interest or something on it. Just like, and he said, I just can't do anything with it. So we were talking about money. And then as the weeks went on, he sort of said to me, he goes, it's funny, since we last talked, he goes, I had a lady pay me $600 cash for a job. And he goes, and I put it somewhere. And he goes, I haven't been able to find it for like 4 or 5 months. He goes, every week or two, I'd go looking for it around the house, searching. He goes, since we talked last time, I found it. And I said, oh, okay. And then he said, oh, for the last 6 months, I've been thinking about buying these new tools because my old ones are really wearing out. He said, but I just don't like paying full price, like, and like he can afford it, but he just didn't like paying full price. He goes, no, I went into 6 different shops asking about this tool every time I went past, and they were all the same price. And he goes, since I was here last, he goes, I went to this other shop and it was like $500 off. I'm like, oh, okay. And then and then the following week he comes back, boom, boom, boom. And then I said to him, do you realize you found 600 cash you lost for like months? You save $500 on that tool and you've been searching for 6 months. And I was familiar with the tool he bought. And it's very rare that it's discounted anywhere. It's the same price everywhere.
Yeah.
And then this, that, and the other. And I said, the price we agreed on for this coaching for 6 weeks? I said, all that adds up to that exactly. And he's like, does too. Like, and like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. But he said, I do have a better relationship with money now. And I do realize it flows where it's enjoyed and liked and looked after. And it flows away from places where it's not appreciated. It's just energy. Money's energy. It's nothing real. A piece of paper has got no value. Particularly now when you've got stuff on computers, it's just made up la-di-da stuff, and they just keep inventing more of it out of thin air. But so it's just energy. And he's like, and so energy flows, and it flows different ways and
Yeah, we
flows
assign the
away.
meaning to money.
Yeah, it
And
flows to you, it flows away from you, and then it can be anything. So yeah.
yeah, and think of how often, you'll walk by a penny or something and you're like, oh no, it's dirty, I'm not picking it up. But that we just discard money, or have these preconceived ideas of money, or have that idea that people with money are not good, or you can't be nice and have money, those kind of things. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting. How would you, like, for people listening, and the guys in particular, what's some of the things that they can do to help access their intuition? Say they're an engineer or they're working in an office, they're
Great
doing the
question.
9 to 5.
Yep. Yep. Great question. All right. So first one I would suggest is look at what is going in your mouth, what you're eating and drinking. The more processed it is, the like our bodies are a frequency we're vibrating. And if someone's an engineer, this is not new news to them. I'm sitting on a chair that feels solid. If you get a super duper powerful microscope and you start to look at particles of this chair, it's not solid. It's 99% invisible, like thin air. Like it's just all the protons and neutrons and electrons vibrating around there at an incredible frequency. And our bodies are like that. They're just all of these molecules, and it's a frequency at different speeds. So, if you've got something coming through on your radio, it's coming through at a set frequency. And if you want to tune into a different radio channel, you adjust the dial to a different frequency. Some things have high frequency, some have low frequency. There's no good or bad frequencies, they're just different frequencies. Food has a frequency. If you want to tap into your intuition, you have to dial your dial to a certain frequency. Your dial cannot go to those frequencies if your body is at a set frequency. And I'm going to use the words here loosely, low and high. All right. Not meaning low is bad, high is good. But typically, processed foods, and you go, what's a processed food, Doug? And I'm saying that to people in America because you guys are shockers with your food. The rest of the world are
I'm
watching
in
you, and
Canada, but it's still
we
bad.
shake our oh, you're in Canada, sorry. We shake our heads at the North Americans like, seriously, you don't realize that is rubbish? If it's in a cardboard box, in a tin, if it's in a jar or something you're going to drink, and if it's got ingredients on the label that you can't pronounce or do not know what they are, like we know what tomatoes, eggs, milk, things like that are. We know what those things are. If there's ingredients in there that you have never heard of, it's probably processed, etc. And the frequency of that food will not help you adjust your. So we need to raise our frequency. We'll use that term. So we need to eat high frequency foods. What are they? Raw foods. And it doesn't, you don't, I'm not saying you have to eat the food raw, but you go to the supermarket and you buy fresh fruit and vegetables. They are at a higher frequency. You can't eat them for 2 days and expect mega results. Months, all right? So what goes in our body? The more natural it is, the higher the frequency, the more that our body gets in tune with the frequency of. So just pretend there's these invisible, whatever sort of beings around you that love you. Like pretend whoever it's going to be, your favorite grandma or someone like that who's passed on, who just always, fed you chopped chip cookies when you're a little kid, couldn't pat you on the head and loves you and gives you big hugs. It's someone like that, and they're there. You just can't see them. And for them to get the message to you, you've got to get your frequency to a higher state where they are. And we're doing that. Now, apart from that, so we've finished with what goes in your mouth, but it is an important basic step. After that, for me, meditation. And guys are going, oh, that's weird. I shut my eyes once and my head just went crazy and I can do, okay, that's fine. There is ways to learn it. Meditation's about observation. Like I'll give a real, this is what I've found. In the beginning, I had to do guided meditations. And for the first 5 or 10 minutes, sure that my mind's gone all over the place, but you'd have some calming music. And that definitely does help change your frequency. If you don't want to do guided meditations, sit in a chair in a quiet spot, close your eyes, and feel the weight of your bottom sitting on the chair. Feel the material under your legs. Concentrate on that. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the air between your toes. Feel the back of your thighs touching the chair. Feel your back leaning on the back of the chair. Feel your fingers. Like if it's a man that's got a pair of shorts on and you've got your hands on your knees, feel your cold hands on your knees. So you're just going through these different parts. So we're not out there in space like la-di-da. We're just here where we are. We're being very present in the moment. And we're trying to stop our monkey mind going everywhere by being we're just, I'm feeling I can feel the carpet on my left little toe and it feels a bit weird and I want to move it because I'm concentrating on that right now, but I'm not going to move it. I'm going to keep it still. Gee, it's hard to keep it still. Oh, I really want to move my left little toe. This is exactly what happens for me. And other people think that doesn't happen. That's fine. This is what's going on for me. I'm now concentrating for like 30 seconds to not move that little toe. And now I'm not thinking about anything else because I'm concentrating on just not like, oh, I've got to keep it still. Well, and that's how I get into. Now, when we get into meditative states like that, it again raises our frequency a little bit. So things like this. And look, how long should I meditate for? How long have you got? And I've heard people say, like, it's like, oh, I don't have time. If you don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes, then you should meditate for 40 minutes. It's like if you
Mm,
don't have time for 20 minutes, you actually need 40 minutes.
right.
So sometimes 5 minutes is great. And I actually, before this session, I was all set, ready up, I was all ready to go. And I had 20 minutes to go. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Now I've got a trick. For last Christmas, I bought myself an expensive electronic toy called a Neurovisor. And it's a light and
Oh,
sound
yeah, I've
show.
used it. I've
Yeah.
used a
And
neurovisor.
so and so it's got 5 minute, 11 minute, and 20 minute sessions. And I thought, yeah, so I just selected one of my favorite 5 minute ones, whacked it on, popped it on, sat in the recliner, bang, and I know in 5 minutes time it's going to turn off. And I just sat there, bang, and I'm off. I'm gone. I'm in another galaxy with the light and sound show from the Neurovisor. And
Yeah.
yeah, boom. So stuff like that I do. Yeah, so that's a couple of things that will help men get themselves in alignment with a different frequency. So I deliberately didn't use the word higher there. That's how I've always taken it. I've got to get to a higher frequency so that I can, but you've just got to get to the frequency where these messages are so that these benevolent beings who love us can get the message through and we actually act, we hear it, but then also acting on it is another thing. So if we don't act on it, like when I heard that voice say, don't say you don't know which restaurant to pick, if I'd have just gone, I don't know, I'm not sure. When I get out of the shower, you decide. Well, do you think we'd have had as good of an evening like for our wedding
Mhm.
anniversary? Probably not.
Yeah.
Would I have been living a like more of a quieter life of desperation after that? Because my wife wouldn't have been quite so happy. Would have been silence in the car all the way to the restaurant. Probably wouldn't have had much of a conversation when we got there, apart from what are you going to have? What do you want
Mhm.
to drink? Now, my wife did have to sit there for like 60 seconds and look at me like with nothing, like me contemplating, but she knows I'm a bit like that. And there's other things too, but that's just some quick stuff that's come to me to help. Yeah, and that last one, you've got to act on what information when information does come through, because if you don't act on it, the beings on the other side are like, oh, geez. The more you act on it, the more you take it, the more you'll be given. Like you've got to use what you're given, use it or lose it. So, yeah, hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I love those things. Those are really good. Dropping the processed food, acting on it,
The meditation, or
and
yeah,
meditation.
yeah.
Obviously, I'm resisting meditation. And yeah, I think I've been on and off doing meditation. Well, let's see. I discovered Joe Dispenza through Lauren Brown, Dr. Lauren Brown, who I did a previous podcast with back in probably 2013, 2014. And so I was doing his meditations, and then it's something I do on and off. But it is when you're doing that consistently, things just flow better. And I like how you talk about it, that you're able to access a different frequency.
Yep,
And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And that's how I've had to, because look, I'm not a highly educated person and I've got to dumb things down to how I get it. And my first car, the radio, it was a 73 model. The radio in it, it had push buttons, like you had to, big clunky buttons, not like light touch. You had to physically
Oh,
push it
I
in a good
remember
half
those
and clunk,
ones.
clunk, clunk,
Yeah.
and then if you didn't push the buttons to the pre-selected things, you had to turn the dial and you got
Yeah. Yeah.
static
Yeah.
in between. So we've now learnt to get past the static very quickly to get to the new. And then when I was a teenager, FM radio hit Australia. So we had to get new radios, AM, FM, to access the different frequencies that were now
Mm.
available. And if we didn't get a new radio, if we didn't stop the processed food, we couldn't access the new frequencies and be cool like our friends listening to the new radio stations. So if you want to connect to different radio stations that have different. If you're bored with your current radio station and you want to access the new one, you got to do new things to get onto the new frequency,
Mhm.
And it's all like that. And people think, oh, but that, look, your cell phone, it's got invisible messages going 24/7 back and forth, like you think, oh no, it's turned off at the moment. No, it's not. There's Wi-Fi signals going in and out of that thing all day long because you pick it
Yeah.
up and you go, oh, I've got 3 new emails. How did they get
Yeah.
there? Like they have, it's 24/7, that thing, and it's invisible stuff going around. It's frequencies going
Yeah.
back and forth to your phone constantly. Um, and these same, well, different frequencies, but on the same principle, are going to different parts of our body. They're going to our brain, they're going to our gut, they're going to, your left leg, they're going to wherever, and your body's picking up different frequencies with different messages.
Yeah, I also find the other two things that are helpful is gratitude gets you out of your funk.
Mm.
And
Yep.
even if you're just grateful that you matched your socks, or if you're not a sock matcher, that you had the perfectly unmatched pair, or just grateful that your bus arrived or whatever it is. If there's always something to be grateful for, you just lower it down to the smallest thing if you're having trouble.
Yeah.
And
And the frequency that you're tapping into or putting out when you're in gratitude is different than when you're grumpy.
oh, for
Like you,
sure.
it's
And
the vibe, the different vibration, the different frequency, they're different. The gratitude is helping you tap into that frequency where intuition can start to flow.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
absolutely. Yeah.
and joy. And
Mhm.
like you talked about, it's not easy to be happy all the time, and that's not realistic. And the fake joy is not it. But if you find yourself really contented with the joyful outlook, that I find helps as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
to wrap up, are there any sort of final words of wisdom that you would have for any of our listeners?
Well, again, I'd be talking to men and ladies. This might relate to you, might not. Take it however you want. But yeah, just reiterating what I've said. If you can make a choice to make one better decision a day, because you're going to just put a challenge on the universe. I want to make, or I am going to make, not I want to, I am going to make one better decision a day, universe. And I believe, I'm putting you on notice right now, I believe that you're responsible for getting that message to me. I'm willing to accept it. Get it to me whichever way you can. You know where I'm at right now. You know how it will be helpful for me to receive that message. And I want to get that message and I will act on it. Now, in the beginning, they'll be pretty basic, pretty easy to act on. If you keep doing this for months, some of the things will be harder. So just pretend the first one is step off this step that's 6 inches high. And you go, it's easy, I can do that. In 3 to 6 months' time or 5 years' time, you might be asked to step off where you cannot see the bottom. I've done that several times. And this is not going to happen in the beginning. But if you just know this, if you do have the guts to take that step, the reward at the end, you will bring you serious elation. You'll be like, oh, that was awesome. Like I could have fallen flat on my face and everyone laughed at me for the rest of my life, but everyone's now like, wow, how did you do that? How did you come up with that idea? How did it work? Like, because that could have gone so wrong. Like, and I've had experiences like that. So, yeah, just dare yourself, dare the universe. I am going to make one better decision a day based on the messages you get to me, universe. So every day, and I'm going to get a book and I'm going to write it down. This is what the universe said to me today, sent the message through to me, whatever it is, however it is, and I will act on it. I'll do it. Because in the beginning, it'll be basic stuff. It'll be a choice between two things, something simple. So you don't get full blown things when you're first dabbling into this. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that's
Well,
helpful.
That's awesome. I find that super helpful for me. I'm certainly going to start practicing a few of the things that you're talking about. I'll keep you posted.
Good, good.
So thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation. I found it so useful, and I'm sure our listeners are going to find it really helpful and inspiring as well. And
Thank you, Shannon.
so thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed it too. It's great for me. I love talking about this stuff all the time, so I'm having the time of my life as well.
Great chat. And so thanks again. And to all our listeners, have a fabulous week. If you enjoyed the episode, please, as always, like, follow, subscribe. It really helps more people find this content. And I am so grateful for your beautiful interactions and your questions and comments to me. If you have any thoughts about what you've heard today, let me know. Share in the comments or send me a message. Have a great week, everyone, and see you next Monday.